I'm excited to be able to have a conversation with somebody that can help all of us kind of navigate a lot of the changes that we are dealing with right now. So thank you all so very much for tuning in. If you're watching this and you know that you have a bestie or even an acquaintance in this group that needs to be a part of this conversation, tag her in the comments, because we want to make sure that we all get involved with this chat today. At the time of this broadcast, we are dealing with the COVID-19 global pandemic. A lot of us are self-isolating. We are social distancing, and a lot of people are struggling with lots of transitions in their lives right now. So having this conversation with our speaker today is going to be so interesting and so valuable to a lot of us because we're all going through it. Okay, so let me bring on Joel Ann so we can get this conversation started. So Joel Ann is going to come on. I'm going to introduce her. Hey, Joel Ann.
Hi, Mo. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes to having this conversation. I've been talking in the group about how this time, especially, I have been intentionally going out and looking for women that have valuable platforms that can help the ladies in this community. And I was so excited to connect with you and have a whole 45-minute conversation just about what we were going to talk about today. But I think it's so valuable. And I think so many of the ladies that are watching are going to find value in this conversation. So let me take care of the business first and introduce you properly. Now, for those of you that are watching, Joel Ann is a certified transitional life coach that specializes in equipping women with the necessary tools to transition from surviving to thriving after experiencing a major life event or loss of any kind. Her experience with personal loss also as a hospice and palliative care nurse gave her a unique perspective and understanding of what grief is and ignited her passion for helping women heal after loss. Jolan's training as a grief recovery specialist is the toolbox she pulls from to help her clients rediscover joy and create a new normal, because we're all trying to figure that out right now, despite their encounters with grief and loss. So again, Jolan, I'm so excited for this conversation. I'm so excited to talk to you and to bring this information to the ladies in our community, because you and I were talking, we were talking last week, I think. You said something that really hit me at my core. And, you said, when most people think of grief, they think of death. But grief is transition. We grieve any types of transition that happen in our lives. And I thought that was so insightful because, yes, that just like death is in our lives, that's transition, that's change. Any change can be the catalyst for a grieving process. And that process is necessary because we have to be able to kind of recognize where we are and what's happening in order to be able to plan to thrive on the other side. So talk a little bit first about your work and what it is that you do and how you've come to this awareness of grief coming in all types, all shapes and sizes in our lives.
Well, there are a couple of things. I've always had a knack for helping people, hence, becoming a nurse and working in hospice. Been a nurse for 12 years, working in healthcare for almost 20. I feel so old saying that. But yeah, working in healthcare for almost 20 years and been a nurse for about 12. And I've always had a knack for helping people. I just experienced a couple of things, just a series of life events that ultimately resulted in me losing myself and not realizing that I had lost myself. And on that journey to find me and to repair me, there was like a couple of steps that I had to take to go through just to be able to get my sense of me back. And then right when I had gotten that back and finally got my life coaching certification and was dealing with that, I lost my grandmother. Wow. And my grandmother passing away, it felt a lot like the same things that I was dealing with, but I was dealing with other things in my life that people tend to tell you, oh, it's okay, just brush it off, or you'll find another one. Oh, it's okay, you'll get over it, just move on. Oh, you're not over that yet? Ugh, you know? And it was just kind of like, wait, why does this feel so similar? What is it that's going on with that? Then through working my way through that and not realizing that I couldn't find the help that I needed to kind of get through that, but I kind of piecemealed it myself and I kind of did it together. Then I lost an estranged brother, and that really hit me. And in trying to find the tools to deal with that, I was just kind of looking for a definition of grief, of what that means, and trying to find something that resonated with me. And I came across a definition from the Grief Recovery Institute that said grief is the normal and natural reaction to change of any kind. So not just loss, but change of any kind. And I was like, that is what it is. Because what I'm feeling, it's normal and it's natural. It's natural for me to be sad because, I had to give up my apartment that I had loved and lived in for 12 years and had to go move in with my mom. But people didn't consider that, loss. People didn't consider that stage to be grieving. But it felt like it to me when I had to do that, right? It also felt very similar when my grandmother died and I wasn't able to pay my respects and to tell her a proper goodbye. I was able to, be there for the funeral because she lived internationally. But at the same time, it was just that. So hearing that definition, it kind of drove me to dig a little bit more into this Grief Recovery Institute. Like, who are these people and how are they in my head and how do they know what's going on?
Right.
And finding them and just realizing that there are over 40 life events that we grieve. We don't consider it grief, but if we really look at the wave of just emotions and the reactions that we go through when we experience these things, and we'll recognize that they are grief. Marriage. People might not recognize it, but getting married, that is a change, right? And we don't talk, especially as women, we don't talk that much about it because you're thinking, getting married, it's supposed to be this blissful and beautiful and wonderful thing. How dare you compare it and call it that grief? But a lot of us, especially if we're getting married at an older age, we've been established, right? We have our routines and we created a life for ourselves. And we essentially have to give that up in order to become one with our new partner.
Yes.
That's a transition, and it's not necessarily a bad loss, so to speak, but that's still a loss of self because you're no longer the independent woman. You are part of a duo now.
Yes.
Right? You have to adjust to working in that way. So people don't think of that. Moving, changing careers. You might be getting a promotion, but you're getting more added responsibilities onto you. You're having more eyes on you. It's all of those things can be considered the emotions that we experience after going through those, that can be considered grief. Well, it's not considered grief, it is grief, but we don't recognize it as such. So therefore, we don't tend to get the support that we need around that. And realizing how much that the Grief Recovery Institute philosophy and the tools that they were using to help, get through that process was some of the same tools that I used, but I needed to reinvent and rediscover who I was. So I just decided, I went through their program and it was a life-changing experience. And I did it for two reasons. One was because I wanted to kind of make sure that my recovery was complete, that there wasn't any unfinished work that I didn't know of, that I wasn't aware of, that I needed to get done. And number two, I wanted to bring that back to my community because where I am at currently, I couldn't find the help that I needed. And I knew that I wasn't the only person experiencing what I'm experiencing, especially working as a hospice nurse. I knew that there were other people there that were experiencing it and just couldn't necessarily find the help that they needed. So that was my journey and how I came to doing the work that I'm doing now. And I absolutely love it.
That is amazing. So you said a couple, you said a couple of things. The first, defining what grief is. And you said natural and normal reaction to change.
Yes.
That right there, like, that's everything. You know, that means we are grieving everything. And now, especially uh, given the fact that people are experiencing their lives being turned upside down, they are probably people. You said that there are over 40, you know, naturally occurring events in our lives that could bring on grief. There are probably people out there that are dealing with multiple events at one time. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about some of those tools that you used without even realizing that you were using them, and then going through your certification program kind of confirmed that you were doing the right things. Talk about some of those. What are some of those tools that people right now maybe just had a recognition that they are dealing with grief because of the marriage or because of the job loss or the moving or the whatever?
Right. Well, the first and the most important thing is to identify what it is that you are feeling, what it is that you're going through. Identify it. Put a name on it. Whether it is that you need to. Oh, did I lose you? Am I still here? Okay. I am going to continue.
You're still here. We're
Oh,
here.
oh, you scared me. I thought I lost you. Okay, so the first thing is just identifying it and being honest with what it is that you are feeling, right? Or what it is that you're going through. Acknowledge that and realize that that is okay. You just lost your job. That's okay. You are adjusting to being at home, working from home, if you are so fortunate to be able to work from home, and also trying to get the kids homeschooled. And it's overwhelming and it's frustrating, and you need to figure out how you're going to get it done. The first thing is just identifying that, you know what, there is a change. And then that will be the best way for you to be able to actually identify what the change is and how you're going to move forward in dealing with it. It's just identifying and accepting the change, accepting the thing that is now, whether it's the fact that you're now married, whether it's you're broken up, you're divorced, whether it's you just got a diagnosis of cancer. That's a hard one to accept. But until you accept that, you're not going to be able to actually move forward with that. So identifying and accepting that it just is what it is, right? It is what it is. There are lots of things that you can do to change depending on what the situation is, but you're not going to be able to move forward in doing the work that you need to do until you identify and accept your newfound situation. And that was one of the first steps that I needed to take that helped with that. And I can move on to the second step is after I identified and accepted what it is that I needed, then I just kind of assessed, okay, I've lost my job. What is it that I need right now? Is it money? Is it peace of mind? Is it security? What is the thing that is going to help me to not feel so hopeless, to not feel so out of control right now, right? So just assessing what my needs are and not necessarily ranking them quite yet, but just brain dumping, putting them all out on paper. Like, you know, what is it that I need right now? You just go ahead and you write them down, you write them down, you write them down, you get it all out. And once you have it all down, then you can take a look at that list and you can say, well, what on this list can I do right now, today, that is not going to overwhelm me, but is going to get me some results, right? And you just tackle it that way at first. Because a lot of times what we tend to do is we see the problem, right? And we see the biggest, hardest, most say for example, because a lot of us in here are entrepreneurs, right? We're entrepreneurs. So we say, I want to start a business. And when we want to start our business, the first thing we think of is the biggest thing. Well, I have to get a logo and I have to do this and I have to do that. And we think of all these other things. I have to get an LLC and all of these other things. Well, if you stop and you think, okay, well, why am I starting this business? What is the objective of this business? And then you move and you do the smallest, simplest thing that you can do first, right? You know all the steps that you need to take, but if you can take the smallest, simplest thing that you need to do first and do that first, then that can make it a little bit easier and not so overwhelming. It's the same thing with tackling your issues, or especially in this time, you're dealing with your new adjustment, right? What do I need first? What do I need? You write down everything that you need, and then you look at that. Okay, of all the things that I need, what do I have? To use another analogy, let's say you want to make some fried chicken. What do you need to make fried chicken? You need the chicken, you need some oil, you need a pot, you need a pan, you need a fire source, all of these things that you need, right? You figure out all of that. Then you can go in your pantry and you can think, okay, well, what do I need? Well, I have chicken, so I don't need to go out to go buy chicken because I have some chicken here already. I have a pot that I can use, great. I have oil that I can use, great. I got flour. Oh, yeah, great. The only thing I need is the heat source. Okay. Then you start worrying about, okay, where can I get the heat source, right? But if you tackle that list of brain dump, you go through and you look and you see, well, which one can I do right now, easiest and quickest? You'll be able to somehow the problem or the issue seems just that much smaller or more manageable, because then you realize all the resources that you have at your disposal. And if you keep working that, then you'll get to a point where you're okay, your problem or your issue is solved, or if you haven't solved it, you are well on your way to solving it. And that was the thing that I did. I tackled each thing one by one. My finances were in trouble, and I tackled that and was able to get that done. I had a broken heart. I needed to heal that and take care of that and get that done. I needed to get back and my spiritual walk needed some revamping. I had to go ahead and do some fasting and praying and get some restoration there. But it's one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
One step at a time, and you can get there.
What do you think? What advice would you give to somebody that is moving through and maybe closer to the end of that process of healing or kind of resetting after grief, and now they want to elevate to the next level? Because what we're talking about, we started out talking about grief, but we definitely don't want to exist in that space of I just barely got out and I'm just hanging on. So what's that what are those next steps to go from you've gotten out of the overwhelm of grieving or dealing with the change in your life to now you are ready to elevate and up level into operating in your purpose, doing whatever this is you're called to do? What advice would you give to somebody in that space?
Honestly, you could still use that same process, right? Because we have to be constantly evaluating ourselves and evaluating what it is that we need and evaluating what is going to make me feel fulfilled, right? So basically you start with taking care of you, right? And then the healing process through the grieving, that was the first step in taking care of you. But just like when you're taking care of a baby, right? The same way you take care of a 6-week-old baby is not the same way that you take care of a 6-month-old baby. And it's not the same way you take care of a 6-year-old child. It's the same child, but as the child grows, the needs change. It's the same thing. As you move through these different stages and these transitions, your needs are going to change, right? And you can't keep drinking milk when what you need is water, right? You can't keep drinking coffee when what you need is tea. You can't keep drinking when what you need is food, actual food and actual substance. So being in that constant state of evaluation, whenever you feel that nagging need, like I don't, this doesn't feel right, assess it, stop and think, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And how is this going to get me to my goal?
Yes.
And if it doesn't align, then you reevaluate yourself. Well, what is my goal? Because sometimes you find that you're asking yourself that question, like, what am I doing? How's this going to get me to my goal? Or like, wait, what is my goal again? Yeah,
Get clear on that first.
Right. So you reevaluate. And one of the things what I had to know to be okay with is that sometimes your goals change a little bit.
Yeah.
When you learn, when you grow after life experience, sometimes your goals change. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay. You pivot, right? You change. You remember the other day on Mondays with Mo, you were talking about swerving. It's okay to swerve.
Right.
It's okay to pivot. The beautiful thing about having free will and being able to make your own choices is that you're always free to choose differently.
Yes. Yes.
So if you're going to own your right to choose, own it 100%. In that, if at this moment I'm choosing something and in the next moments I'm realizing that that doesn't align with me, just know that it's okay for me to choose something different.
A different choice. Yes.
Right? So just self-care and just be in a constant state of evaluation and tackle the thing that you can first. And one of the reasons I suggest that you do that, right, is a lot of times when we have these big grandiose goals and the first step that we make in trying to get there, we kind of fail at it, we tend to shy back and kind of cringe and then we don't go for it. But if you're strategic in tackling that thing on the list that you know you can do right now, you know you can get it, right? You're giving yourself almost that easy success. You're giving yourself that easy win. And when you do that and you conquer that, it just makes it that much easier for you to move on to the next step, right? You do that and you conquer that, and then you move on to the next. You do that and you conquer that and you move on to the next. By the time you're on the 5th or 6th step, even if there's 20 steps to go, by the time you're on the 5th or 6th step, you've gotten your momentum, you've built your confidence in, I can actually do this. And so that way you can continue moving forward. Self-care is going to be very, very, very important, because if you aren't physically, especially mentally and spiritually clear and in tune, you are not going to be able to get an accurate assessment of where you are and what your needs are. So it's very important. And I know that us as women, we tend to take care of everybody else around us,
yes,
and leave us for last. But you have to prioritize self-care. Remember that self-care is not selfish. And self-care doesn't always mean a bubble bath with champagne and getting your nails done. And, self-care sometimes can mean saying no to going out with that one girlfriend that drains your energy and takes
thank you.
Time. Yes. Self-care can be saying no to that stuff. Self-care can also mean saying yes to cooking dinner because that's what you feel like doing and that's what you want to do, right? Self-care can mean saying no to that promotion because even though it's going to bring you more money, it's going to be taking you away from your family. Self-care is whatever it is that you're doing that is going to make you a better you and put you in a better position to serve your family and your community better. At least that's my opinion, or what my definition of self-care is. Whatever it is that you need to do for you that is going to position you to be a better leader, a better provider for your family, and to show up for your community, then that is self-care. Don't be afraid of it, because it's not selfish, because you can't pour from an empty cup.
That is 100% true. And especially when you're doing that work that's related to your purpose. Well, okay, so first, before I say that, let me say this. Like, I've had conversations with people um, about this, and I'm gonna use quotations on purpose, this idea or this concept of everybody having purpose, right? And I've talked to people that have said they don't believe that everybody has purpose, and it adds pressure. It creates a sense of pressure, negative pressure, to continue to say that and to speak that, because everybody doesn't have a purpose. And I disagree, because I believe that your purpose is tied to your story. Your purpose is tied to the unique mix of experiences and events that have happened in your life that prepare you to then help somebody else that's in a similar experience or event.
Yes.
So, yeah, so I love that you talked about the self-care piece, because again, when you are doing a work that is so very intimately tied to you and your past and your experience, if you don't make sure that you, the person, are full,
Right.
you then will burn out trying to help other people.
And not only will I burn out to trying to help other people, not only will I burn myself out, but I will burn out the people that I'm trying to help in my state of emptiness.
Yes.
That's how we create, that's the saying that broken, like hurt people. That's what happens. If I don't heal my hurt and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not intentionally hurting somebody else, right? But all I know is hurt. So that's all I have to give. So that's, hurt people.
Right.
And to say that not everybody has a purpose, that is a load of baloney. My purpose might look different from yours, okay?
Right.
My purpose might just be to show up and be a good wife and be a good mother and raise the best son ever, because my son is going to turn around and be the president of the United States and change the world. That could be my purpose. But if I'm not in tune with who I am, I will never find that. It's not everybody's doesn't have a grandiose, bigger than every, like everybody can't be Moses.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes. And maybe that's what some of that mentality is rooted in, because usually when you hear that word purpose, it's attached to people who do big things. Tony Robbins talks about working in his purpose, and Oprah talks about working in her purpose. So we have this misconstrued idea of what purpose is, but we don't realize that everybody has a role in the thing.
Yes.
Because it's not even though we look at it and we idolize the people, it's not even about them. It's about the people that they're serving and how they're making the world better through what they're doing. So yeah.
Look at I got my finger right here, right? Everybody knows my finger. Finger's a very important part of my hand. We don't think about that, right? I lose my finger, the functionality of my hand decreases. Yes. Forget about that. This joint, these joints. Don't nobody talk about these little joints in here. Something happens to this little joint. The purpose might not seem significant in this moment, but if something happens here and I can't bend that joint on my finger right now, I lose a lot of functionality in my finger, and then
in your whole hand.
My whole hand.
Exactly.
Right? Just because it's not something that's visible, just because it's not something that's grandiose and great and everybody is talking about it, doesn't mean that it could very well be the most important piece of the puzzle. But because you're so caught up in, well, it might not be my purpose, and we're so caught up in existing rather than living, right? Yes. Because you can only live once you have found a purpose, and you can have multiple purposes. Nobody's saying that you have to be stuck or tied to one thing, but give your life meaning, and it could be something as simple as being the best wife and mother you can be. It could be something as simple as that, but you have no idea the impact that can make on the world, because that child or those children that you are raising, you're leaving them here to become future leaders.
Right.
And you being the best mother that you can be in this moment could be the reason why, we have a cure for corona. You never know. You never know.
So we have a comment. This is a really good comment. Important to understand you probably have more than one purpose.
Exactly.
When one is fulfilled, recognize it and be prepared to fulfill the next.
Yes.
Oh, that's so good. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. They said, for example, my youngest is 19. Next.
I love it. I love it.
Yes, yes, yes. But that's so valuable and so rich. And again, why it's so important that we shift and we navigate those transitions in life, and we figure out, use those tools like you talked about, and figure out how to maneuver ourselves away from being overwhelmed so that we can align with that purpose, because that's the higher work, right? And recognize that for some of us, we can never get to the purpose if we don't pivot, if we don't complete the journey. That's the completion of the journey. If we don't move all the way out of it, we're stuck in the game of being confused and being frustrated and being overwhelmed and grieving this change. If we never complete that part, we won't be able to receive the purpose or the next phase of the journey.
Perfect example. I'm just going to use myself because I'm not going to be talking about other people's business, but I'm using myself. There was a point in my life when I was just merely existing. And when I say existing, I literally mean I was just existing. I got up, I went to work like I needed to, and then I came home. And the only way I knew when I was supposed to go to work is when I was at work, I would ask, when am I on the schedule next? I would look at it and I would see it. I would put some kind of a reminder, set an alarm so I would know what it was when. It was so bad to the point where I would come home and my lights were shut off, not because the money wasn't there to pay for it, but because I hadn't realized that 2 months had gone by. I was just existing, waking up and going. Didn't realize that 2 months had gone by and I hadn't paid my light bill. Paying my rent only because where I lived at the time, we would get a newsletter on the first of the month, and they would stick it into your door so far that even if I was home and I didn't go anywhere, I could see it. I'd be like, oh crap, I got the newsletter. That means I need to pay the rent, that kind of a thing. And was I actually surviving in that state? Absolutely. Could I have continued to live my life in that state? Sure. Nothing was wrong. I didn't feel burdened. I was eating.
Wow.
I was getting up and going to church. I went to church every week. Went to work, come home. But I was just merely existing. Now, had I not moved through that phase, had I not seen through that, had I not stopped and evaluated myself and thought, well, okay, what is going on here? What am I doing? What is this accomplishing? What are my goals? How is this helping me get toward my goals? Yeah. I would still be there and be content living that life. I would not be the transitional life coach that I am today. I would not be the grief recovery specialist that I am today. And I wouldn't be able to help all the people that I've helped so far, or be positioning myself to help all the people that are coming for me to help. So we wouldn't be having this conversation. I would have never met you, Miss Mo.
Right.
So it's very important because we never know what's on the other side. And sometimes it's not even about us. We like to take all of the glory and everything for us, but sometimes it's not even about us. It could have been for the last person that went through my last, 8-week grief recovery support group that needed it, that said, she got more out of the 8 weeks that we did together than she did out of 2 years of therapy.
Wow.
Maybe that was that one person that I was supposed to be able to reach and touch and help. But until you start evaluating and like you said, just moving forward in your purpose, and like the other person in the comments said, when one thing is finished, you move on to the next, but you're not going to know what the next is if you're not in that constant state of reevaluating and making sure that you're on the right path and making sure that you're aligned with what you need to do and where you need to go.
And you said something earlier that just made me think of something else. You were talking about how when people think about purpose and they have this idea that it's just this big grand thing. And so if their purpose isn't that, then they don't want a purpose. And that's dangerous, because then you've gotten your identity attached to the thing that you're supposed to do to serve, which is a selfless thing. So just what you were saying, recognize you have to free yourself of attaching who you are to the purpose for your life, which is selfless, and will probably require you to give some of yourself to others. You won't be able to recognize when one purpose, when it's time to move on from this work to this work, because your idea of your identity is so caught up in, oh, I'm the this. So you aren't even willing to let it go. You can't even let that thing go. So you can't shift and get into the new thing because you so caught up back there.
Yep.
Wow. So good. So good. So Jolene, this has been a really good conversation. I love that you shared those very practical tips and those steps to take people through, and highlighting and leaning on the self-care aspect, because that is so very important. It's great to talk about, navigating change and navigating grief and overwhelm, but we have to remember that we have to take care of ourselves first. Before we can do any of the great things that we're called to do, we have to make sure that we are good first. So that I definitely appreciate you calling that out and leaning in on that, because that's so very important.
This was so good. I feel like I could sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours.
Yes, it's so good. So Jolene, tell our viewers where they can find out more information about your work as a grief recovery specialist and the transitional life coach. Where can they contact you if they need some more support?
Well, they can contact me on my Facebook page, Evolve Spirit Body Mind LLC. I think that's the one, LLC. Or on my personal page, you can send me a message. I'm a part of this group, so you can always reach out to me here in this group, Joanne Mothersill. Or you can check out my website, www.evolvespiritbodymind.com, because let's face it, all three work together, right? You can't have a healthy mind and a healthy body without a healthy spirit. Like, it all works in tandem. And when all of them are working together, then that's when you know that you're golden. But you know what? You can't have that if you don't give yourself proper self-care.
That's right.
Bring that back.
That's right.
Yeah. I do also have a Facebook group that I am growing. It's called Evolving Through Grief.
Okay.
And then that's where you can get a little bit more support around grief and have, just frank and open conversations. Yeah. And I would love to have you guys there as well.
Well, this has been so good. Thank you so much, Jolene. This is so good. Oh, we got another comment before we roll. In encouraging others to find or redefine purpose, would you speak to grieving things or circumstances? Because some only equate grief with the loss of a person. And that's kind of taking us right back to what we talked about at the top, at the beginning of this conversation. And would you speak to, when you're encouraging them, do you, in your work as a coach, do you lean to what they're familiar with and, talk about, okay, grief as loss of a person, or do you kind of coach them through that process of recognizing that circumstances and change in their life also can spark and can bring on grief too?
I coach them to where they're at and what their needs are, right? Because there are a lot of times where people will come to me thinking that they're grieving one thing, and it turns out it's something completely, totally different.
Wow.
Right? I've had someone come to me thinking that they were grieving the loss of their grandmother. When it turned, reasons why it's very important to just be able to have open and honest conversation, not just honest with me as your coach when we're working together, but be honest with yourself. What are you feeling? What's driving this feeling? What caused it to happen? Do you know what I mean? Because you might just attribute it to the most recent thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then something else will happen down the line, and you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, wait, what? You know, it's like after my miscarriage, I couldn't watch a commercial with anything with babies in it for quite a while, you know, because that was a trigger to the fact that, oh, I should have one right now, but I don't. You know what I mean? And was it the thing on the TV that, was it the diaper that I was grieving, or was it just the loss that I didn't really pay attention to? And even still, up until recently, because I don't think I really completely processed that grief until it was October of last year, that I really allowed myself to actually go through and process that and feel okay with that. And there were other things that were coming up that, you know, oh, my sister-in-law is pregnant and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking that, oh, she just has an attitude and that's why I'm mad. But no, she's pregnant, and in a reflection of she's having that one thing that I don't have, and will not say that will never, because you never say never, but you know what I mean? In that moment, in
that moment, it feels like it's the end of everything. Yes.
Right. And it will feel like the end of it. But because if I'm not processing, and if I'm not able to really make that connection, I'll sit there and say, well, I'm just mad at her because she has an attitude. No, she don't have an attitude. You just didn't deal with your stuff. So it's coming up. But just being able to recognize and just being completely 100% honest, and just having those conversations. And it's groups like this and conversations like these that get us starting to talk, and to help us to open up. Because the three things that we all need, and that we all experience, and that we all need to talk about in life are the three things that we don't: money, death, and sex.
Well, you just said a whole word right there.
We don't talk about it.
We need to talk about it, and people avoid them like the plague.
Yes. So, yeah, you know, it's not the thing. It could be the situation. Losing, when you lose a loved one, or when you lose a relationship, maybe that person was bad for you. Maybe that person was abusive. But what you might be mourning is the security of having a home to come home to. Yes, he was abusive, but he paid all the bills and he kept a roof over your head. So you're mourning the loss, not necessarily the loss of the relationship, but the loss of the security that came with having a roof over your head. You know what I mean? So you kind of have to meet each person where they are. And if you're providing that support for a friend or a family member, just try to listen without judgment, because half of the time they just want a listening ear. If you think about you, right? And when you were at a moment where you were in pain and you were vulnerable and you just wanted, you know, what was the thing that was most important to you? You just wanted to be heard. You just wanted to be heard, and you just wanted to be held. So remember that for you when you are placed in a position to be that for somebody else. Sometimes they just need somebody to listen, just so they can get it all out, and you don't need to point them anywhere.
That's so good. So good. And that was a nice little last minute question that just pulled out like a whole different set of nuggets. Those three things we need to be talking about, you know. Yes, so good. So Jolene, again, thank you so very much for this conversation. I know that the ladies that are watching live and that will watch this on the replay are going to definitely find value in this. I'm glad you're a part of this community. So again, people having takeaways and follow-up questions, they can just tag you and post and ask you and get that support that they need, and definitely follow you and connect with you in your Facebook group or on your Facebook page for more one-on-one support as well, because we all go through this. You said over 40 life events. Everybody's going to deal with it at some point. And especially now, as we are in these very uncertain times, people are dealing with all types of feelings about all types of things that are happening and aren't even sure how to process. So I'm so grateful to have you in our community to be able to be a support for those that need it.
Happy to be here. Very
So
happy to
thank
be
you
here.
so much. People are saying so good. Thank you so much for sharing in the comments. Thank you again, Jolanne. Ladies, she's here. She's in the group. Ask your questions. Feel your feelings. Like
Yes.
recognize what's happening and get the support you need to help you go through it. So thank you, Jolanne, again so much. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We will see y'all later. See you in the comments. Bye.